Chelsea was telling them that if they have any questions and are not happy to do it in English, I can translate. We can continue now.
Okay, thank you for returning.
We have, I think, a question.
Yes, sure. Please.
Hola, ¿qué tal? Buenas tardes. Estamos entrevistando esta dirección, no es sencillo, porque efectivamente debe tener el contexto de la organización. Hay algunos casos en los que se complica más porque a lo mejor la alta dirección es nueva, ¿no? Entonces, pedirle a lo mejor alguna situación de enseñamiento, dime cuál es la política de la calidad, o sea, a veces ellos reciben el sistema ya implementado, ¿no? Entonces, en ese caso, por ejemplo, la alta dirección es nueva y realmente no sabe muchas cosas del sistema porque va llegando y a lo mejor le toca auditar. ¿De qué manera es mejor abordar esta situación, ¿no? O sea, objetivos de calidad, indicadores inclusive, porque a veces o sea, no conocen el sistema porque van llegando, ¿no? Entonces, en ese caso, ¿cómo es bueno abordarlo? Y en otros casos, cuando ya la alta dirección se supone que sabe toda esta cuestión, porque ya lleva tiempo, y se ve que no está muy enterado de cómo está así manejándose el sistema, pues qué tan bien visto es levantar una no conformidad al respecto, o en este caso, ¿qué se hace?
So, Nayeli is asking about, I guess, particular thing that the university has is that we have to renew our directors of the institutes of faculties every 4 years. So each director has the possibility to be reelected for another period of 4 years, but the maximum is 8. There are no re-election issues here in the university. Those are the rules for top management. So she's asking that sometimes what's happened is that this change of directors are very close to the internal audits. And in that case, sometimes the top management is not fully involved in the system. They know some new things, but they don't have the experience about how the management system works. And she said that it's particularly difficult to audit all the directors in that case. So how far an auditor has to go in those particular cases when there is need? And the other comment is about those cases when they have been for a while in that post and that they are not fully committed. So how you can manage that as an auditor? Do you have to put a no conformity in that case regarding the commitment, management commitment? So this is what she's asking.
Okay, the first question is one of audit planning. So if you know that the director is going to change, then you must change your audit plan so that you interview the top management, not at the change point. That's down to you and your audit plan. It's not down to them changing. Okay, I don't know how feasible that is, but to me that is a very simple audit plan.
So we should conduct the audit before the change the director. But that would be the idea.
That would be helpful.
That in this case is about the coordination, not because you are not in the, you don't control the audit program.
Okay, and on the second question, there is a paper on audit reports that we will look at. And also about writing up non-conformity. There's another paper on that. You are allowed as an auditor to make observations rather than to write non-conformity. And one of the problems is that auditors get frightened of the claim, so they prefer to write observation, and the client then doesn't take any action on it because it doesn't go into the non-conformity report, and then you have to put an action date, and it will be complete a plan when it will be completed. It's up to your judgment. You're dealing with the top management. They pay your bill. You have to be nice to them. Are you really going to put you are a non-conforming director? I think if you have a relatively new director who doesn't seem to be taking this on board, one thing you do is you have a conversation with them before you publish the report. You say to them, look, I'm not finding your commitment very satisfactory for these reasons, and you must be able to support your argument. At this time, I will register an observation. But please understand that we are very close to a non-conformity. And if you have so many non-conformities, then your certification is at risk. So the first time that happens, be nice to them, say observation. The second time, if they are still persisting, then you say, I'm sorry. We were nice the first time, we explained carefully, now I have to formally give you another. We're not there to destroy businesses. We're there to support people, to help them try and improve their systems and try and improve the way they live. So, be nice. Yeah. Okay?
Do you need translation?
Okay. All right, so the next paper we're going to look at is the one about conflict. When the Annex SL structure, the high-level structure, was first published in 2012, and it had context as clause 4, leadership as clause 5, and then it had all the material on risks and opportunities in clause 6 in planning. We got a lot of negative comments. People said, why are you doing this? Isn't going to guarantee me my product. This isn't going to help improve my environmental performance, my health and safety performance, or whatever the standard is concerned. Nowadays, that criticism has turned around 180 degrees, and many people say, I only look at content, leadership, risks and opportunities, and actually the rest of the standard, what you're requiring, is fairly mechanical, low-level material. So the importance of the context analysis has increased quite significantly in many users' eyes and in audit companies. So what do we mean by context? Here it's talking about what the organization wants to achieve, its strategy and how to achieve it. It's stated, that's action. How do companies go about determining their content? I remember doing a workshop with a very large multinational company. And we were trying to go through the standard fraud-based laws, and we came to 4.1, determining the issue. And we went, what's the issue? We don't understand issue. What do you mean by issue? Okay, all right, let's not start with 4.1. Let's start with 4.2. Who are your stakeholders? And they fairly well understood, you know, the owners of the organization, the financiers of the organization, the workers, the suppliers, the customers, the regulators. People can understand that list, and you can find lists of that in the guidance. And then you go, well, what do all of those people want? And again, it's not difficult. You know, the financiers, they want to make a return on their investment. The workers want a nice place to work where they will learn, they will grow, they will be well rewarded. The suppliers want consistent contracts so that they have a good relationship. You can imagine all of those things. So starting with the 4.2 is quite a useful way of then leading into the more abstract issues that perhaps 4.1 become. And for me, I start by saying things like, if you were thinking about business continuity, you know, you open the newspaper in the morning and you see there is flooding in Taiwan or Malaysia. What do you think when you read about acute flooding in Taiwan or Malaysia? Would anyone care to guess? How about computer motherboards are made in Taiwan and computer chips made in Malaysia? As soon as there's flooding, there is going to be a worldwide shortage of computer components. You know, did you think about that at all? Because now virtually every manufactured product involves some sort of computerized component. If you suddenly see there's flooding in Taiwan, what does that affect your supply chain, and how does it affect your onward supply of products and services to your customers? So when I start talking to people about issues, I say, well, do the stakeholder bit to work out what they want, but then start thinking about things like business continuity, you know, what happens when random events occur? What happens in case you have a fire or some other shortage, water problems? You know, think about those things. Start planning how you cope in that situation. But then you need to start thinking about other things. What are your competitors doing? Are your competitors happy that you as a business exist, or are they trying to kill you? Maybe you should be trying to kill them. What is your concept? I mean, you start entering the whole field of mergers and acquisitions. You know, when is it a good time to acquire a competing business? Or when should you merge? And if you do acquire another business, what are the problems with merging? How would that affect your quality system? Now, I may be painting this at quite a high level, but you know, even within a single department, you may have to merge an activity from a different department. How do you integrate that activity into what you're currently doing? It's a change process. So you have to think about your change process. So contact suddenly becomes a key driver of what is it that the system has to do for it. And is it, we might have had the vision of what we want to achieve yesterday, but is the vision of what we want to achieve tomorrow the same? Think about car manufacturing. Yesterday it was diesel engine. Tomorrow it's electric vehicle. That's a huge change in content. All of the supply chains have to be changed. You need battery instead of motor. So thinking about your content is critical for what your strategy becomes, and then what your manufacturing or service delivery processes are going to be, and then how that affects your quality system. So how should we audit it? Okay, so let's see what the notes are. Unfortunately, this one goes quite linearly. It deals with 4.1 before 4.2. And the information it says that auditors might look for: business plan, review of strategy plan, competitor analyses, economic reports and business sectors. Okay, it's what analysis, minutes of meeting, action lists, diagrams, spreadsheets, mind mapping diagrams, external consultants. So this is trying to give you, or give the organization, a picture of how it is currently performing, how it's currently set up. But for me, there's nothing about business continuity in that book. But yes, if you were going in and auditing an organization, trying to look at 4.1, you would say, show me that you have these things. Show me that you've actually done them. Now, when you're dealing with very small businesses, you can't necessarily ask for physical evidence. If you imagine a micro business of 5, 10 people, maybe the boss does all of this context analysis in his head. And the boss doesn't necessarily want to write it down and share it with all the workers in the company. It's just the same as if you're a big company and you're about to try and do a merger or an acquisition with another large company. Do you want to tell the public that that might be about to happen? Because suddenly the share prices might go up and down. So you probably don't want to be very public about the information. So how do you cope as an auditor with trying to talk to senior managers and saying, what is your contact? What's it going to be tomorrow? How is that going to affect the changes to your system? And what are you planning to do about it? This is where issues about confidentiality come in very strongly, and auditors guaranteeing that they should be completely confidential about the information they give. But these sorts of documents can support that assessment that the organization has done a 4.1 analysis properly. Otherwise, if I was with the small business, I would say, I would ask these sorts of questions, of a small business owner or manager. Tell me what your business plan is for the next 6 months. And then you listen to what he said. So you've confirmed he's got a business plan. What changes will you be making to your products and services within that agreement? Again, you listen. So you have to do a verbal auditing process. And as one of my friends once said, if you don't think verbal auditing is sufficient, then you have just destroyed most legal systems, because most courts work on the basis of verbal auditing. A witness is called, they say something, you challenge them, and then you accept what they say, or you try and challenge it again. So verbal auditing is acceptable. Okay. But again, just on that last paragraph at the top, this is obviously one of those discussion points with top management. Now, are you going to get this kind of information from the quality manager, the person who's been assigned to run the quality system? I don't think so. The person who's been assigned to run the quality system will have been told, here is your budget. You need all the monitoring, measuring equipment you need. You need certain personnel, you need internal auditors, go away and run the program and come back and give me the result. The quality manager is not necessarily going to have that business level information that the context is describing. So you do need to go to the top management in this example. Again, the last sentence and going on to this second page, however, understanding the nature of the risks and opportunities, the auditor should be able to understand the adequacy of the organization's review of its content. Risk is a very difficult issue. Most of the certification bodies, here we are, Annex SL was published in 2012, so we're 10 years on from now. ISO 9000 in 2015, or 7 years on from now, and they are still struggling with auditing risk. And the next paper I'll be looking at is about risk. But if you start thinking about the context here, and as I mentioned, flooding in Taiwan, you open the newspaper. What is the risk that my supply chain is going to be completely disrupted by an external event? How do I plan to deal with it? So that's the level of risk you're looking at in this instance. You're not going down into the system and looking at process risk as a noble level. Okay. Interested parties. So this is 4.2. Understanding the needs and expectations of the interested party. The first question is, who are the relevant interested parties? Do you know? I mean, we can refer again to our lists in the guidance annexes of 9001, 14,000, you know. As I mentioned, the owners, the financials, the workers, the suppliers. But there could be other people that you just don't know about. What about the local inhabitants around your production facility suddenly being affected? I can tell you a story of a paper making factory. It was opened in a remote region of Scotland, and everyone was very happy. It was bringing jobs to this area. What they haven't realized is that the paper making involved cutting down trees and then crushing the trees, chopping them into bits, and then you produce eventually sheets of paper from them. The process of cutting the tree meant there were little spores from the tree bark floating in the local environment. And suddenly all of the people were getting sick with infection, with respiratory issues, because they were breathing the spores. Suddenly their laundry would hang out a white sheet to dry, and let it go to the green and blue, and all the spores came. How do you mitigate against that kind of situation? What degree of investigation do you do before you make the decision to put a new factory in this sort of area? Now, this might be crossing the boundary into environmental or health and safety risk, but at the end of the day, if your factory is going to get shut down because your production processes are inadvertently causing all of these problems, then your quality system is not built in either. So again, looking at, are the local people, is society a relevant stakeholder? Most people, the quality would think not. They would say, it's just the customer and the suppliers who are my key stakeholders. But again, how do you audit what you should be doing with 4.2? This one I found rich on minutes of meetings, tables, spreadsheets, database, external documentation, quality manual, etc. That doesn't sound to me very useful information about external stakeholders. Maybe with the financiers of the organization, yes, you could get some details about how your share value has changed over time and whether that's satisfying them, and whether the dividends you're paying are satisfactory to them. Maybe you can get some feedback. But how would you get that feedback and then demonstrate it to an auditor in a way that doesn't reach very confidential information? Employees, I mentioned employee satisfaction with working. How would you rate employee satisfaction? Because there's nothing really here about, we've done employee satisfaction surveys, these are the results of the surveys, or we've done employee quality circles, and these are the rates of new suggestions we're getting from employees. This text is a little bit weak in my view, but I think I'm conveying to you the idea of what an auditor can look for is, say to a company, show me how you're dealing with this group of stakeholders. Show me what activities you're doing. Show me that you're improving the quality with that group of stakeholders. It might not be possible. If you're making a big investment in a new production plant or something like that, your financiers may have to accept that your share value is going down because of the cost of the investment, the increased borrowing cost. But that's a logical place for it to be, and they will understand, and their satisfaction level should not be changed. But if there's suddenly the company finds that material has gone missing or stolen or something like that, and this causes the share price to drop because they're obviously not in control, then the financiers are going to be very upset. So again, when you're dealing with a particular category, you need to think outside the box a little bit as to what are the sort of issues that they're going to be interested in, and in order to maintain their satisfaction.
Now, we have a question about what happens when you as an auditor identify that a third party is missing. Because there is another guy, and I think the question is related to this. The guy who auditing this requirement, which is 4.0, says that if they have determined that those third parties are not important for the management system, you as an auditor cannot actually argue against that. But there's the question is related to that.
Actually, this is a very historic issue. The clause talks about in 4.2 the identification of relevant interested parties and their relevant requirements. Why is that? It's because before the high-level structure was produced, we had a situation where certification bodies were saying that you haven't considered this stakeholder. And the companies were saying that the certification bodies are identifying irrelevant stakeholders. They're forcing us to take actions on people that we don't consider important or have such a minor impact, and yet they're failing to certify us because of it. So the standard was carefully written, or the high-level structure was carefully written to refer to relevant interested companies. And I think somewhere in a note, it said that it's down to the organization to determine who is relevant. Now, if as an auditor, I found that a major stakeholder group that had a major effect on the quality system is missing, I would make an observation about that. And I would say, again, next time round, if it's not dealt with, it becomes a non-conforming. Okay? But that's how I would deal with it personally. But the object was to prevent certification body demanding attention be given to minor stakeholders. So one way a company can deal with this is to list all of the stakeholders it can think of and then prioritize them. And then you say to the certification body auditor, look, here are our top 3 stakeholders: customers, suppliers, investors. This is the action we take for them. So top 4 priorities. This is the action we take in relation to them. And then below that, we start dealing with our neighbors, society, certain interest groups. And that's how they're approaching it. By prioritizing and showing that we've at least considered them and decided what action we're going to take, the auditor can act this. Really, with this paper, the next 2 parts, there's a part about determining the scope of the quality management system, and then there's another part later on about quality management system and its processes. That's because someone has a view that doing the context analysis determines the scope of the system and determines the processes you have. In a way, that's correct, because why did the group writing an XSL decide that we had to do context analysis in the first place? If you go back historically again to the earlier 9001 and 14001 standards, what was the starting point of the standard? The starting point of the standard was the organization shall establish a policy for quality, policy for environmental needs. And you heard my comments earlier about the policy one-line statement taken by the photocopy. You're going, that's wonderful. But where did the policy come from? Was it you just sat down and thought, oh, wow, maybe it's write a policy statement? No. What was the thinking that went behind the creation of that policy statement? And that's where context came from. So by doing the context, you then understand what is feasible in terms of policy. And also, as some people think, it then becomes feasible in terms of driving what the scope of your management system is, because from doing your context analysis, you know what kind of products and services you can supply to the market, what you can beat your competitors in that, or what is actually needed. So that will then go into the scope statement of what it is we're trying to produce as an organization. And then from what it is we're trying to produce or supply, you determine the processes needed to achieve that. So this is why in this paper, there are the links to the scope and processes. But I'm not going to address those here and now, because I'm going to look at the scope and okay? Any questions on anything? Are you happy
Yes.
with it? Yes?
Something that I think this guy is missing, Charles, is what happens when, the organization is constantly addressing or identifying some weakness in the management system. And you as an auditor are seeing it, but the standard is not going so far. As in 9001 also. They are asking you for determining the context, internal and external. And usually the organizations do a sort of analysis, of course, others do another more difficult one. But what's happened when you as an auditor are seeing, you know, year by year by year, some weaknesses or some, yes, not exactly risk, because the standard is very clear on what you have to do with risk. But some weaknesses there.
For me, that would not be a context issue. For me, that would be a failure, and this would be a major non-conformity. Would be a failure of the management review and the internal audit process. So internal audit should be consistently identifying that you are consistently failing to address some aspect of quality within the system. And management review should be looking at the internal audit reports and going, look, we are saying the same thing every year. Why are we not planning action to fix that? Okay. So I would be raising a non-conformity against the performance of management review in defining actions to resolve the quality issue. And in fact, you take it further beyond management review, you take it into the improvement clause, because you say against clause 10, you know, here is an obvious need that has been identified by your internal audit function. Management review has failed to put actions in, and you have failed to improve. So as an auditor, you have 3 potential non-conformities for that. Okay. But that, to me, that's not a context issue. Context is much more about the wider external environment that can impact your organization and how you decide what the purpose of your organization is, how it's going to survive, and what you need to do to achieve that. Okay? Okay, so now I'm going to try the paper on spec. How many different scopes are there? Will someone get? 1, 2. Come on, someone. 3, 4. There are 4. Okay, so first of all, there is the scope of the standard, which is written as clause 1. You know, what is ISO 9001 trying to achieve? Secondly, there's clause 4.3, scope of the QMS. What is the quality management system trying to achieve? Thirdly, there is the scope of certification. What is it that is being certified? Because it's not necessarily everything that the QMS is addressing. And fourthly, there is the scope of the audit that you as the auditor need to be conducting. So there are 4 scopes. Now, the first one, we can't do a lot about. That's written by the standard. And I think most of us have read clause 1 enough to understand what we mean by that. But the other scopes cause lots of problems. So this is quite descriptive about the different types of scope. I'm not going to read these. Where we have a lot of difficulties is the auditors evaluating whether the scope of certification is accurate. Because a lot of companies want to say, reproduce the world. And the auditor goes, yes, nice certificate, they produce the world. That is technical misrepresentation, and you can be sued for that. So the auditor needs to make sure that what they are certifying accurately reflects what the company is doing. And there are lots of sort of cases where the wording is ambiguous and you need to make sure it's correct. So, for example, a company could ask for its statement of certification to say it is involved in construction. But in reality, the only thing it constructs is building. So, should it have such a broad scope as construction, or should it be construction of building? Really, you want to bring it down as the auditor to construction of building. Now, what happens if that construction company, which traditionally never did design, suddenly has contract where it was being asked to do the design of the building? So as an auditor, you should go back to the company and say, well, now you are doing design and construction of building. And maybe your scope needs to change. But then maybe a year later again, they revert to just doing construction of building, no longer doing design. Then the auditor has to say, the scope of certification has to change back to just construction of building. So what I'm trying to convey to you is that actually the certificate of scope, the scope of certification as given on the certificate should not be a very fixed thing. It's dynamic. It can change. You as an auditor have to maintain close surveillance of what the activities of the organization are. And make sure that that certificate statement is correct. Okay? Now, we come to the more difficult part, which is deciding what is the difference between the quality management system, the scope of the QMS, and the scope of the bit of the organization that is going to be certified. So, you can think of a multinational corporation. Huge, it has divisions in Mexico, in London, in Paris, wherever. And it says, okay, so we're going to put in an ISO 9000 system for the first time. Are we going to do it across the whole of the organization? Or are we going to slowly build it up division by division? And the logical way of doing it is to go division by division. Let's try the one in London first, and we'll try the one in Mexico, maybe the one in Paris. But they construct a quality system for the entire organization. Now, how do you as an auditor certify just the London division separately from the global company? There is a way of doing it, and within this scope document, it talks about some organizational boundary. So, what are the organizational boundaries, and what are the boundaries of what you are actually trying to audit? With ISO 9001, we're slightly different than the other management system standards. So 14001, for example, you can't say, I'm just looking at this one production line within a factory building, because environmental impacts are not constrained to a specific space. So for 14001, you have to do it by site. Whereas for 9001, we can say, even within a single site, we can reduce the certification or auditing assessment to a single production line. So for you with laboratories, even within a single laboratory, you can say, we are auditing the testing of one type of material as opposed to the whole laboratory and everything there. But this has to be very clearly defined and written up, both in terms of the scope of the audit and in planning the audit, and then in, as I just mentioned, the scope for the certification after. But there are some factors that cause quite a lot of problems. And this is a list of some of the things. The number of products and services. So, you know, if you're suddenly dealing with a production line with 20 different types of products and services, rather than just one type. For example, the company General Electric in the US. Most of us think of General Electric as being a white goods manufacturer, washing machines and cookers and things like that. Did you actually know that General Electric's main product is finance? Many years ago, it found that by giving loans to people to buy its washing machine, it was making more money than the financing than from the actual production. So we have this misconception that General Electric's main product is physical white goods, whereas in reality, its main product is banking. So how do we know when we're dealing with a corporation, what parts of it we're looking at? Well, that's by agreement with the organization, obviously. They're trying to say which bit they want to do. Yeah? But, you know, so products and services, am I looking at General Electric white goods manufacturing processes, or am I looking at its financial services processes? Huge difference in the way we would plan the audit, because financial services are into lots of digital processes, whereas white goods are into lots of physical manufacturing processes. Externally provided products, processes and services. Again, are you comfortable with why we call this externally provided, not outsourced? So earlier on, we used to refer to outsourced products and services, but people didn't understand what outsourcing means. Outsourcing has many different definitions depending on which sector you work in. So it was decided to change it to externally provided. And we didn't go back to using suppliers, because external provision can be by a parent company to a daughter company, for example. So again, the General Electric model, maybe they have a department making electrical cables that supply power to the company making the white goods. That's an internal transfer, but in terms of the white goods manufacturer, this is an external provision. So it's a language issue. We're trying to and cover all types of supply models, not just the old traditional supplier or contractor supply model. But externally provided products and services or outsourced processes. Absolute nightmare. How do you know if the organization has sufficient control on an outsourced process? Very difficult to establish. Many organizations have outsourced processes that they traditionally did in-house. A typical example is some of the large multinational companies have outsourced their internal accounting function to one of the big accounting companies. So traditionally, the company understood the process, it knew what it was doing, it knew how to put in controls in place to make sure that what is being provided by the outsourced provider is adequate. But there are situations where you don't understand what is being provided, which is why you have outsourced it. So, for example, many small businesses, when they start out, they don't understand about creating a website, yet they know it's fundamental to shift and stop to advertise their product that you have to have a website. So what do? You go and find another small business who's good at designing websites, and you give you a URL, and you hire them to do the work for you. Now, from an ISO 9001 point of view, lots of your sales are going through that website. Lots of your customer data is going through that website. This is critical information for you. Maybe even customer complaints are coming through that. But you don't understand the technology enough to control it. So how can an auditor audit whether the organization has sufficient control over that kind of outsourced process? And this paper tries to give some answers. I'm not going to give them. It's really trying to see the negotiations or the contracts between the company and the outsourced provider and saying what are the benchmarks they will provide to ensure fulfillment. Because you can understand enough, oh, I want a website, I don't know how it's created, but I want that website. So I can see that the website is created. So my benchmark is, I've hired you to be my outsourced provider of the website and all the information and the related databases. I will test the functionality and see that I'm receiving the data and information. So you can, as an auditor, go in and say, no, show me the contract with the outsourced provider, show me the benchmark, and tell me, or show me that they are performing against those benchmarks and that you have monitored them against those benchmarks. So again, when deciding scope, this is, where does the responsibility effectively lie? Is it with the organization? Is it with the external provider? And where is the dividing? Multiple sites. I just mentioned, if you're having a multinational organization, you could be producing the same product. Biscuits in Mexico, biscuits in London, biscuits in Paris, same biscuit. Okay, multiple sites. But as an auditor, you need to go and audit every single one, or you sample. So one audit, you will go to London, the next audit, you will go to Paris, third audit, you will come to Mexico. That's part of your sampling. Service centers. Well, service centers, you're dealing with the sort of product where a customer delivers the product to you. So a customer property, you are operating on that customer property, but you don't actually know what you might find as you operate it. The classic situation is you take your car into what you think is a $10 fix, and the bill comes back with $1,000 because they go, oh, well, when you took the wheel off, this bit fell off, and then when you took that bit off, and that bit fell, you know the situation. So that can happen with servicing agricultural property. The service centre be done. What are the scope and boundary limitations when dealing with those? You can have servicing at customer premises. This is where part of your organisation is to go in and fix equipment at the customer premises. You may find, for example, the heating systems in this building. are maintained by an external heating company. So they are coming in to fix and service your property here. So how does an auditor audit someone fixing the heating systems here? Do they have to follow their heating engineer to see that they're doing it properly? How do you get that audit evidence of the system is functioning properly? You have other strange situations, collaborative products and services. We have had some major infrastructure projects in the UK. The tunnel that was built for the railway between London and Paris, going underneath the sea, was a collaborative project between French construction companies and British construction companies. Or I can think further back in history, the Concorde aeroplane was a joint project between the French and the British again. What is the scope of the audit in that situation? Which organization has responsibility for the quality system? Because sometimes in these sorts of organizations, you'll see that a part of a system from one of the collaborative companies is used to determine how the collaboration effort will be conducted jointly. So really, for the auditor in that situation, you're needing absolute clarity on how the partnership will be working, who has responsibility for the system and what bits of the system, and writing up the scope for that is going to be fun. So it's a very difficult one to write down. But you can imagine that the scope might be the construction of a supersonic aircraft. You know, that would come to. Another issue that becomes difficult sometimes is shared facility. Again, you're in, I don't know, some form of, I'll use the example of a garage for cars. Maybe two companies are sharing some of the equipment in that garage. Maybe some welding equipment, or maybe some, I don't know, pressure testing equipment or something. Where does the responsibility lie when the auditor goes in to audit who is in control of what? And the last example that they're giving there is projects limited by time. Again, if I think about the tunnel train project, okay, it had a time limit and it overran by years. That's not the problem. The problem is, if you're going to audit that sort of situation, what does improvement mean? Because for us, when we look at the improvement clause, you're thinking about a static type organization that is constantly doing the same thing, perhaps. And so you're saying, how do you look at what you've done, improve it, and then bring that improvement into the next iteration? But for perhaps a big infrastructure collaborative project, that collaboration dies as soon as the project is delivered. So where does improvement have an impact on improving the quality of that system? For me, there's another quite horrific thing, which is about the longevity of companies. You can look up research about companies and the average length of life. 20 years ago, the average life of a company was about 40 years. And in fact, many companies failed when they were about 100 years old. Right? Because we had an originating person who started the business, he grew it. Then he handed the company to their son or daughter, to increase the company years ago. But then the third generation spent all the money. So at 100 years, they were taking all the resource away from the company, and it didn't have the resource to be flexible and continue producing in the market. So if you look at the history of companies, there's many that just about make it to 100 years old. There are much fewer that make it to 300 years old. Some you will know, tea companies, but then 1,000 years old, there are really only a few Japanese restaurants and hotels and food producers that are 100 years old. And that's fine. And for me, saying 40 years, it's okay. It takes you a couple of years to put the quality system in. You've got time to do a bit of improvement. Today, the Fortune 500 list estimates the longevity of the company is 12 years. 12 years. Is it worth investing in a quality system? Because by the time you put the system in, the company's gone. I mean, you might get one iterative cycle of improvement. Now, admittedly, a lot of these companies that are driving this shortening of life are software companies, or they make some kind of software product, and suddenly the company gets bought out by a bigger company, etc. Or maybe the product doesn't go away, but if you're looking at who owns the quality system, and you as an auditor trying to audit that system, you know, it's not necessarily just project limited by time, it might be the organization is limited. So that again makes the scoping of it quite an interesting topic to deal with. So where do we set the organizational boundary for when we're trying to do the audit? And it's the definition of an organization that really is used to decide that. It's a personal group of people that has its own functions with responsibilities, authorities, and relationships to achieve its objective. And then you've got the note one about the concept of organization. It includes, but is not limited to sole trader, company, corporation, firm, enterprise, partnership, etc., etc. Okay, so if you are a division of a large multinational company, at what point does the authority over the system end? Is it that you have to have total control over the system as that subdivision? Or is it that the parent company is still allowed to influence what you do? The reality is parent companies will always have an influence over what you do, otherwise there's no point in maintaining the subdivision. So you need to be very clear as an auditor when you're in that situation. Where does the boundary of authority lie? And how is that communicated between the parent organization and the subdivision, potentially? For some standards, IT information security standard, ISO IEC 27001. This has become a huge problem because if the parent company can in any way influence the subordinate company, then you actually have to audit the parent company's security in order to certify the subordinate company's security. And people are saying that's impossible. This breaks the whole certification model. But if you take that statement from the definition of an organization, it's the responsibilities and authorities. You know, if I'm division Y of XXX corporation, Um, who is setting my quality policy? Is it from the group level or is it from my level? Maybe it's both. Maybe it is our policy is adapted from the group policy. So you created the link. And in addition, because of the nature of our products and services, we're expanding the policy to include these additional criteria. I think I've described enough the difference between the four scopes. Yeah. People are nodding, they have enough of scope. Any questions?
Sí, ¿tienen alguna pregunta? Claro este tema porque siempre es un problema, sobre todo en las primeras, las auditorías de primera vez. Esto que él está comentando es muy importante, ¿no? Porque una cosa es lo que todo el sistema, ¿no?, que se planificó abarca, y otra cosa es lo que verdaderamente hasta ese momento los procesos que se están incluyendo, ¿no? Y muchas veces de esa auditoría depende el alcance de la certificación, porque ustedes muchas veces determinan que hay ciertos procesos que ya están listos y otros que no, o ciertos laboratorios que están listos y otros que no, y entonces se bajan esos del alcance, pero siguen estando en el sistema, pero no certificados, ¿no? Y no necesariamente lo que esté en el sistema es todo lo que hacen los laboratorios, es lo que él está hablando. Entonces, creo que este tema de las divisiones, ¿no?, que se refería y la liga, ¿no?, con la parte, matriz, ¿no?, como le llamamos nosotros, se le dice de los reportes, ¿no? Para nosotros es mucho más fácil porque finalmente los laboratorios dependen, ¿no?, de las divisiones, o de los, de las facultades o de los institutos, ¿no? Y es más fácil para nosotros verlo, pero en el contexto de los laboratorios nacionales, a veces hay laboratorios nacionales que trabajan, bueno, no a veces, todos los laboratorios nacionales tienen que trabajar con otras instituciones, ¿no? A veces son instituciones también de la universidad, a veces no. A veces tenemos el problema de que, como en el caso de algunos laboratorios que tenemos nacionales, donde cierto sistema de gestión, ciertas normas se aplican a ciertos laboratorios y a otros les aplican otras normas, ¿no? Como es el caso ahorita de Unipre, con biomédicas, con veterinaria, ¿no? Donde Unipre tiene buenas prácticas de laboratorio, veterinaria tiene el 2001 y biomédicas tiene el 35.001. Entonces ahí, cuando se hace la auditoría, pues es muy importante ver qué alcances hay, ¿no? Que le aplique a cada quien, ¿no? Y todo es un sistema, bueno, no es un solo sistema, al menos porque en el caso está separado, pero en este caso esto que está explicando Charles, ese tipo de casos es muy importante. Tenemos unos laboratorios nacionales que ahorita estamos viendo cuál va a ser su alcance, donde ocurre eso precisamente, ¿no? En un laboratorio está el Instituto de Ingeniería que hace supercómputo, pero está también la Facultad de Química que hace cuestiones analíticas, y está otra de las entidades, no me acuerdo, ciencias, que hace temas obviamente biológicos. Entonces también ahí los alcances son diferentes, el enfoque es diferente, los requisitos de las normas son diferentes, ¿no? Entonces ahí se complica mucho y es de lo que habla esta parte, ¿no? Entonces no hay preguntas. Sorry, Charles, I was just explaining so how we are managing in zone where our facilities, so this that you talk about makes more sense for us in our context. There are no questions. Questions, everything is
I had
crystal clear.
forgotten to cover one point. My apologies. And this is non-applicability. Okay. Does everyone understand the term non-applicability? Okay. I have to give you a history lesson again. Originally, there were 3 9001 standards. So 9001, 9002, and 9003. 9003 was not about quality systems, it was about having a final inspection and testing process. 9002 was about having a quality system, but for organizations that didn't redesign. And 9001 was the quality system that also did design. In fact, in the original days, it was assumed that virtually every company would be 9002 certified. And 9001 would be for companies involved in new technology and innovation. At that time, the military were trying to develop rockets, ballistic missiles, and you had innovation in materials, in guidance systems, in rocketry systems, so 9001 in those days was envisaged as being for innovation. But as time progressed, it became obvious that most companies were making design changes in a way that were uncontrolled. They're not satisfactory. And this was causing a lot of quality problems. So as we move towards ISO 9001-2000, it was decided that there should just be one standard, and companies were allowed to exclude complying with parts of the standard that were not applicable. So 9001-2000 included design, but if you didn't do design, you could say, on the scope of my certificate, we don't do design. This has become contentious, particularly for services. What is a service? A service is a point where you interact with the customer in delivering the product. It could be in a restaurant, you're delivering food. You're, I don't know, cleaning a floor, something like that. Where it becomes awkward is that actually the design of the service is very close to the design of the management system. So you're saying, in order to provide the food, we must have a food purchasing process. It must be cooked according to certain processes. It must be delivered according to certain processes and then presented to the customer according to certain processes. All of those are actually not manufacturing steps, they're management system steps. The purchasing, the processing, the delivery. So with services, it becomes difficult to separate management system from the product itself. And for this reason, historically, with 9001 and 9002, most service-based organizations only applied to 9002 certification. But nowadays, we're saying to them, really, you should be thinking about using the design function to gather information to help you improve your service. So think about an airline. An airline is providing the service of transportation. But what does it provide? It provides some form of booking system. So it has a website. Are you telling me that you don't design your website? You put your logos on it, you put requirements of customers for input information. That's a design thing. You then say, well, you're transporting them in an aeroplane. No, for any given size aeroplane, you can change the number of seats in. You can change the design of the seating material. You can change the type and sophistication of the entertainment system. You can change the level of the food you provide. There are lots of variables. So why not include those variables into some sort of formalized design process? So that you can then say, you know, we made this change. We decreased the seat spacing. We packed in an extra 10 people on an aeroplane. Now, did that affect customer satisfaction? Maybe, maybe not. I'm sure in Mexico here you have lots of low-cost airline carriers, as opposed to the traditional, more expensive one. You as a customer will purchase the low-cost one, but you accept that you're going to get a very small seat, you're going to get very restricted food, it's going to be uncomfortable, unpleasant, but it was cheap. Come on. Whereas if big, expensive airplanes started, or companies started treating them like that, we'd start thinking, hey, this is unacceptable. So at what point does the customer satisfaction change through the design of the service? So a lot of this sort of guidance here is about, can you include or exclude design beyond some of the more straightforward things? We have the traditional, they've got a service there that has no measuring equipment. The barber shop would be example of it. So you don't need to comply with the requirements of calibrated equipment. That's logical. You know, an organization that does not handle customer or supplier property, including customer information. That one's difficult. Even a barber shop takes bookings for when customers are coming. And that booking might have a telephone number or an email address or some sort of social media contact. So I would say actually excluding customer property is quite difficult these days. And if you are excluding customer property, such as customer data, then how are you going to start getting customer feedback if you can't contact them to say, were you satisfied by our service? How can you help us improve our service? So some of these are a bit difficult. There is an interesting example given lower down here, which might be applicable to you. This police department example, which says that the policeman department does not apply the requirement of determination of criteria for selection of suppliers, because it is the responsibility of a different government department, and therefore they have no control over it. So I don't know in the university who controls the supply of equipment through the laboratory. You know, if it's a centralized function, then you might be able to exclude some of the evaluation of the supplier required. Okay. I think that's about enough on scope. Yeah. So I think we will try and get I'm just checking if I've forgotten anything again. I discussed a little bit about changes. Let's try and look a little bit at policy and objective. So, I was very rude at the beginning about policy statement. I'm still very rude about them. Monica thinks they're great, and I think that please show me commitment. I want to see a manager walking around telling me that, you know, systematic authority. I don't want a one line above the paper definition. So, this guidance deals with policy objectives and management review. So it's in 3 sections. And the first part is about auditing policy, audit methods, interviewing top management, evaluating through the record of management review, the commitment and involvement of top management in the establishment, implementation, monitoring, and updating of the quality policy. Do you really see a lot of updating of quality policy? In my experience, a company going through certification for the first time, maybe they have a nice manager's away day, nice lunch, and then they write a statement. And then it never gets changed, ever. The same statement will be persistent for 20, 30 years. Because it's so generic. And this is one of the reasons why I find them not particularly helpful. But, okay, so the auditor has to check that at least during management review, you can see that the managers have looked at the quality policy and gone, I'm sure we need another away day, another good lunch, and leave it and change. Maybe. I don't think so. I'm being sarcastic.
Yes,
Yes.
I think this discussion is really for probably Corrie and some people else. Because the issue here with policy is that my particular point of view came from some old issues, probably from the HS of conformity assessment. The Guide 25 was saying all the time, the laboratory needs a policy for this, the laboratory needs a policy for that. Just go back into those, all standards.
Yeah.
When conformity assessment started, everything was a policy. I mean, right now there are some standards that still ask for some kind of policy. And in my particular view, they are not seeing the evolving of how management has evolved.
I will agree with you. I can remember the fight between unions and managers to get health and safety policies established. In the 1960s and 70s, that was one of the biggest areas of dispute between trade unions and managers of big companies. But they wanted managers to commit to good health and safety practices. But yes, I can understand how in the 60s and 70s, when a lot of these management systems started being written, the concept of management commitment to a policy was a huge thing. And it's just in today's business environment where things change so far, I'm just not seeing the same level of effect.
You can argue that if you have a good management system, probably, having a policy is right now, before, that's one particular point of view. I guess most of those now. Just when implementing a management system, well, you have to write a policy, addressing all the points that the standard has, and try to actually disseminate out between all our colleagues and try to make them understand. But really what's mattering is that this policy is embedded is transmitted in the whole management system, no? For me, that is basically important, and this, because it's, I see it right now, or nowadays it's not as important and used to be. Auditing sometimes executive. You don't have that approach anymore.
Well, I can understand. I will give the example of my own work. So most of the time I'm running ISO committees developing standards. I have policy statements that say I shall run those committees in a way that is completely independent of UK national interest, because they are ISO committees. Now, that's a policy statement. I understand it. But in terms of the processing of my work, I never repeat that statement. It's something that is over here, it's been made, it is documented somewhere. But let's look at the next statements here. So, assessing whether management has effectively translated the quality policy into understandable words at all levels of the organization. Okay, that's sticking on the wall. Conducting interviews with persons to verify if they have the required awareness, understanding, and knowledge of the way the organization policy relates to their own activity. Really? You know the quality policy? You saw it by the photocopy? Okay. And how does that affect your work? It distracts me when I push the button on the photocopy. You know, this is why, for me, auditing this is very difficult. The one area where I find the policy useful is in the setting of objectives. Apart from that, for me, the policy side is a historic leftover from 20, 30 years ago. My apologies if you don't feel the same. Okay.
I think everybody agrees.
Yeah.
On that, actually, we have had some problems, some issues before, not now, but in old days, auditors tend to ask everybody about, you know, what was the policy.
Yeah.
And it was a big problem, because if you don't say them exactly as it's written, then automatically you go and control it. No? And until these guys appeared and said that actually that is not right. No? That you as an auditor have to check how the policy is implemented, no, in the daily basis work of the people, no, so how they translate that policy, which is usually general as we mentioned. It's a nice statement that we are going to produce quality services or products, and that we are going to improve, and that we are going to fulfill the requirements of the standards and the legal requirements and so on, because this is actually what the requirements of the standards for the policy. So everybody put the same things in the policy, but what we as an auditors need to do is actually check how people are implementing that. No, as Charles says, no, is something that is writing, people understand it, but what is more important is how they can take that and the daily activities, no? And in the case of the university, is how they teach with quality, how they conduct research with quality. So, no, so that's how we interpret it in our context, no? In the context of ISO 9001, because of course when we are auditing 17 or 25, as we mentioned it before, they have more policies. But that's have historical reason, as we just mentioned it before, but that's another story. We agree with you, Judge.
Okay, thank you. So we didn't move the science of auditing policy very far forward, sadly. Okay, is it by defensive? Objectives, on the other hand, much more important. Obviously, you need to, as an auditor, ensure that objectives are being defined, that they reflect the quality policy. I don't understand why the next bullet says substantially coherent. And surely they should be coherent. Substantially means 90% coherent. Well, what's missing with the other 10%? That worries me. Not quite sure what they think of me. Are aligned and compatible with the organization's context and strategic direction. I'm going to come back to them. And are aligned with its overall business objectives, including customer expectations. Okay, now this could be one of those difficult things. I gave you when we were discussing content. If you are going to play mergers and acquisitions, you might not want the market to know what it's about. So how can we expect an auditor to demand to be told the context and strategic objectives that relate to quality policy? Because if my objective is to take over my nearest competitor and merge the two companies, I'm going to have huge integration problems. I'm going to have to decide between which staff member continues playing the same role, because there will be two staff members, one in my current organization, one in the target organization. I'm going to lose one. Which one am I going to lose? They will have a site down the road, and my site is here. Are we going to move to one site? There are lots of factors that can affect. But so what is the degree of transparency that the organization has to give to the auditor? Because if as an auditor I come along and I go, I'm not informed that the merger or an acquisition is about to take place, and I audit and I go, yes, we've written your policy, yes, the objectives that we will decrease scrap, we will increase the number of customers, these sorts of things are normal, regular functions and are happening, and I put a tick in the box. I then come along 6 months later, and your site is closed down because you decided you're moving to the other side. And I go, but why didn't you warn me? How does the auditor have a consistent approach? Now, that might be the commercial world. I'm not sure that's going to apply with you and the laboratories. But you have to realize when you're assessing some of the suppliers, and you will be assessing critical suppliers in some cases. They are monopoly suppliers. What happens if they suddenly disappear? How do you cope? But that's some of the issues with objective setting and evaluation. Again, the question is, are you allowed to challenge the organization on the adequacy of the objective? Again, I think, as we said, maybe be polite the first time and maybe be a bit more severe the second. You know, there's no reason why you can't say to the organization, I've been here for 3 audits in succession. You have the same objective each time. We will improve quality by 1% by reducing scrap by 1%. We never achieve it, why not? But we just keep setting the same one. Why are you not being more ambitious in order to drive improvement within the organization? That's difficult, I know. It's very difficult when you've been producing the same goods or supplying the same service for many, many years. It becomes difficult to change those kind of objectives. But again, there's no reason why an auditor shouldn't say to the company, all the organisations, you're showing me the same again. And that to me is not improvement. So really think about how you can be more adventurous next time. Again, this guidance it talks about, you need to obtain evidence in which way the quality objectives are suitably cascaded throughout the organisation. How do you find that quality objectives are cascaded? Is it through managers coming and having public meetings with you and saying, look, we lost the contract with such and such a company because we were late supplying things, or we had cost overruns which we hadn't predicted, or we didn't communicate with the customer properly? What were the reasons that we had problems on certain contracts? And how were those reflected by, objectives saying that we will improve, we will improve on-time delivery? But how is that communicated within the organisation? Is it just like many companies do these days? You get every morning an email from your company saying, our exciting news of today is, oh, we lost that customer because of these reasons. Very impersonal. Or do you actually have a weekly meeting or something where the managers have been briefed in turn by the more senior managers come and say, look, we're not performing adequately in this area because we didn't meet the objective and therefore we've lost the customer. So as an auditor, how are you going to look at the different systems? How are you going to find out that the cascading is just by the daily email versus through the weekly meeting? How are you going to get that evidence? Right, I'm just very quick, appreciate and supposedly run over time. I'm just going to try and finish this paper very quickly with auditing management review. There's quite a lot about management review on this paper. It asks you to look at things that should be happening during management review, changes to policy and objectives, plans, actions for improvement, changes in resources, revised business plan, budgets. Well, I think the black lettering there is quite interesting. It's, management review should not be an exercise carried out solely to satisfy the requirements of the standard and auditing. It should be an integral part of the organisation's business management process. Often when I was dealing with companies installing ISO 9001 systems for the first time, they would say that the things we find strange about 9001 is the requirements for internal audit, which we've not previously had, and the requirements for management review. And I would say to them that you're already doing management review. There's no way your bank is not letting you go and have a discussion about your business plan at least once a month. Plus, you're meeting with your board member or your financier regularly to monitor performance. So you're already doing performance appraisal. Now all I'm asking you to do is to add on to the financial appraisal. How is that financial appraisal affected by quality? So on that basis, some of these companies said, actually now we understand and it's quite easy to do. But as an auditor, what is it that you've got to look at? What is the information you're going to be given? I think we've got, You've got the list of items there, you've got the list of items within the standard itself, which says non-conformity reports, improvement plans. You've got it in the standard. So I think for an auditor, that part is fairly straightforward. The question that is vital, if you're trying to convince a company that using 9001 is beneficial, is from the outputs and management review, is seeing what actions are planned and the follow-up on those actions, because that's the improvement process. So as an auditor, I wouldn't worry too much that the review itself is being conducted, but what are your improvement plans coming out of that management review process, and how do you take that forward? And I think that about covers this paper in a very rushed way. I'm sorry about that. That's it.
Yeah, but we can review it later, we can, this afternoon, and if you have any questions, please let us know tomorrow. I'm going to switch to Spanish. Recuerden que Chad pidió que le digamos que papers queremos que cubra en este curso, son 40 y tantos, y no los vamos a ver todos, y hay unos que son evidentemente para organismos de certificación, como se dieron cuenta, hay un buen grupo que cubren esa parte. Entonces, por favor, escríbanos, amigo alumno, y díganos cuáles quieren que cubramos. Estamos cubriendo, como ya se dieron cuenta, algunos que son donde hemos tenido dudas en las auditorías y donde siempre hay cosas que tienen que quedar muy claras, como la parte del contexto, las partes interesadas, lo que vimos también del alcance, que siempre hay discusiones en cada nuevo sistema o en cada ampliación sobre el alcance, y esto que él estaba mencionando, pues nos debe de quedar claro a todos para que también nos logremos criterios. Entonces, también para los que nos están acompañando, que nos están viendo en YouTube, por favor, también de la misma forma háganos llegar cuáles son sus propuestas. Gracias. La parte de las guías de auditoría que vamos a cubrir, porque nada más estaremos aquí hasta el próximo miércoles. Entonces, pues les agradecemos mucho, nos tardamos un poquito más por los problemas que tuvimos al inicio técnicos. Yo quisiera agradecerle muy de veras sentidamente al personal del instituto por todo su apoyo, porque los pusimos varios predicamentos de la mañana. Entonces les agradecemos mucho su apoyo técnico y el que hayan podido apoyarnos en la grabación de este curso, porque siempre los cursos que damos se graban, podemos ir después como auditores a revisarlos, y durante las auditorías de tercera parte también, cuando tenemos problemas con los auditores, pues también mostrarles lo que es el deber ser de acuerdo a lo que dicen que nos están haciendo las guías de auditoría. Entonces, pues nos vemos mañana. Muchísimas gracias por el favor de su atención. Yo creo que le damos un aplauso a Charles, ¿verdad? Thank you very much for everything. And see you tomorrow, everybody. Thank you.